Going to go over the results that we had here in the state of Louisiana, Election Day, November 16, 2019, and the third governor's race that we've had over recent weeks. The Democrats going on and continuing to retain this seat in the state of Louisiana with John Bel Edwards. Right now, he's ahead by around 1.5 percentage points, and in terms of the vote differential at about 20,000, there's still around 3 to 4 percentage points in terms of the percent of precincts reporting, and still a number of those are coming from Democratic areas, so it is possible that Bel Edwards could pick up a little bit more of a lead, but nonetheless, at the end of the day, Bel Edwards is going to retain this seat. So I want to do a bit of a discussion talking about this race and these governor's races that we've had over the past couple of weeks. So this is another situation where Donald Trump kind of gets a bit of egg on his face going into a deeply conservative GOP-leaning state in campaigns for the Republican governor candidate and isn't able to make enough of a difference to get the Republicans over the line. Now, I actually think that Trump had somewhat of a positive impact on the Republicans' chances to win in both Louisiana and Kentucky because he created more awareness around these races, and that's the strategy that the Republicans had coming in is deeply GOP-leaning states like Kentucky and Louisiana. If you want to go on and win those governor's races, your best odds at doing that is getting as many people out to vote as possible, because the more people that vote in deeply conservative states, the more Republicans that you're going to get voting. And there was big turnout in both Kentucky as well as Louisiana, some big turnout gains, and I think that probably made things a bit more competitive than they might have otherwise been in races that weren't as much nationalized. So the GOP, they were trying to nationalize these races, tie these candidates to Trump, and it probably had somewhat of a positive impact because Trump is still very, very highly approved of in states like Louisiana and Kentucky, but federal races can be different than state-specific, and we're seeing that in Louisiana and Kentucky, respectively. So coming into election season, these three governor's races, I picked the Democrats to win in Louisiana and Kentucky, and I picked the Republicans to take the governorship in Mississippi. And that's actually what happened in each of these races, and doing quite a bit better with my predictions in this election season than what I had in some of those Senate races, for instance, those state-specific results back in 2018. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Republicans were able to even more successfully make those statewide Senate races tied to the national image of Donald Trump, able to flip, areas like Florida, Indiana, North Dakota, Missouri, picking up a lot of those red state Senate seats away from incumbent Democrats. So that's where I went wrong a lot in 2018. Now here in 2019, Trump wasn't able to make quite as much of a difference. And also Senate races, it seems like they've been trending more to being tied towards federal presidential results, whereas a lot of these governorships can still be a bit outside of what we get in those federal races. So that's also kind of an interesting trend that we're seeing. Now, if we take a look back at the 2015 race, John Bel Edwards, he won by about 12 to 13 percentage points, and he did a lot better in a lot of these smaller rural districts. But what pushed him over the line in this race particularly was doing really well and running up vote tallies in the population centers in and around New Orleans, Baton Rouge, as well as Shreveport. And then also another really interesting result, if we can take a look here. So Jefferson County, relatively high population there, right outside of the county, or excuse me, they're not called counties in Louisiana, they're called parishes for whatever reason. Maybe it's a French word, I don't know. But anyways, so the Orleans County is where New Orleans is, and so even more votes were in Jefferson County. This was an area that was essentially a 50-50 split between John Bel Edwards and his Republican counterpart back in 2015. And we can see this time around, he actually won by about 13 to 14 percentage points. So doing significantly better in one of the more populous areas of Jefferson Parish. But at the end of the day, we can see right now, John Bel Edwards, he has around a 3 percentage point lead over Eddie Rispone. Whereas back in 2015, he won by about 12 to 13 percentage points. So that just shows you how much better the Republicans did in turning out more conservative voters in a lot of these smaller, very rural and Republican-leaning areas, but then also doing a bit better in and around Lafayette, which is a bit more Republican population center. So the Republicans turned out a lot more vote there, which helped. And again, some of these mid to smaller size areas where just the Republicans were able to do a lot better in turning out more vote. But at the end of the day, John Bel Edwards also getting quite a bit more total vote in 2019 than what he got back in 2015 because of those differences in and around the population centers. So kind of some interesting trends that we're continuing to see state by state, where the Democrats are doing very well in urban and suburban, larger and mid to upper size districts, and in Louisiana, they're called parishes, whereas the Republicans are continuing to run up bigger margins in a lot of these rural and mid-smaller level counties and parishes. So kind of an interesting trend that we're maybe continuing to see as there's more polarization in our politics between urban and rural, and then also those suburban voters trending towards the Democrats as well. So that's a lot of the different points that I wanted to touch on in this particular video. Donald Trump, it's probably going to be reported in the mainstream media that it's not a great look for him, that he's going into states like Kentucky and Louisiana that are deeply Republican, campaigning for Republican governors and not able to get them over the finish line. But I still think that specifically these deeply red states that still have a high approval overall for Trump, I think he was able to elevate and nationalize these races enough and bring more voters to show up at the ballots, where the Republicans actually probably were a bit more competitive than they would have been if we had lower voter turnout, for instance, like this race back in 2015, where John Bel Edwards won by a larger margin. So things that we're continuing to look at as we kind of wrap up the big governor's races that we had in this off year of 2019. I appreciate you guys stopping on in and having me ramble about these different elections and the results. I'd appreciate you if you subscribe to the channel, and if you want, you can get more of this type of content where I go over election results, going over polls, and just making political predictions and taking a look at these races that we're going to continue have coming up here. It's a really exciting time as we head towards those 2020, those primaries and caucuses before we head into the general election. So I'm really looking forward to the next year that we have in this election cycle, and it's going to be really exciting. So I appreciate you guys stopping by, and I hope to see you guys back here for my next video.